G'day, Stu from UAV Futures here, and today, well, what's in the box? What we've got the Tyro 79 and $79 for an FPV racing drone. That's kind of crazy how cheap prices have gotten. I remember like individual motors were pretty much $50 US when I started, so they get a whole quad for 79 bucks is pretty ridiculous, but does that mean it's any good? What this is the part one. We're gonna put it on the bench, break it down. I'm gonna sort of go through the build processes of how it went together, and then in the part two, that's where we're gonna take it out of the field, fly it around, see if any of the other boys are out there, get their opinions on it, and yeah, find out, is this a good quad to buy, or is it too cheap and just not worth it? Because I agree, $79 sounds fantastic, but at the same time, we still want to make sure that there's got to be a hard limit to where you can spend some money and still get some fun out of the thing. So I'm not too sure. That's where we'll take it out flying around in the part two. But this is the part one. We'll talk about the components. Let's do it. Stick it on the bench, and I'm going to say I'm kind of tentatively on the fence. It could be amazing, but I don't know, $79. It's very hard to believe you can make a good quad for that. But let's do it. Have some fun. Build the thing in 3, 2, 1. Alrighty, here it is, all on the bench, tipped it out of the box. What I'm going to do as an overview, the first things first, I'm going to put this thing together, and then I can go through the components, talk about what it's for. So I'm sort of going to time myself, see how long it takes to put together this $79 quadcopter, and then cut back. So with the magic of editing, let's have a look at what it looks like in 3, 2, 1, alakazam, boom! Rightio, there it is, all done. Thanks very much, editing. It probably took me about 90 minutes to put together. There were a few little teething problems that I guess you can come to expect when you're building such a cheap $79 FPV quadcopter. But what it is, as an overview, you get all those parts in the box, you put it together, and this is what you end up with, a little 3-inch racer that some people are saying is a little rocket, so we'll have to take it out and rip it around and see how it actually goes. It's not going to carry a GoPro or anything like that, but what you do get is this nice little neat package, and it's good to see they actually put everything, they managed to fit it inside this time, because last time on the original Tyro 99, they had the VTX sticking on the top, which in my opinion was pretty dumb, but it's nice. Everything when you build it goes together, and this is the end result. Now what we should do, let's go through the components. I'm going to start at the outside and take off these rubbish props, and I do say these watermelon coloured props are absolute garbage in my opinion, but we'll still test it out, see how it goes. But I guess again, everything I mention when it's a big con, like I don't like these props at all, well, you got to remember the price. So maybe for an extra couple of bucks, the dollars you save on this, you can get yourself some nice Gemfan flashes or something like that. So we'll put those to the side. Underneath, this is where we've got, I want to say stars of the show, because they sound well spec'd. There's 1607s, 2800 kV. Now that should absolutely scream, but they're a very cheap motor. So when you're turning them, they feel cheap. And just when I was arming it, you can sort of hear not too much of a rattle. So look, I like the specs on here, but it's going to be another thing. We'll have to see how they actually go in the field. Has potential to go well, but again, like everything, you kind of get what you pay for in this hobby, and they might just be too cheap to really be worth it. Moving towards the middle, this part was pretty easy. Soldering it up, we just had our 4-in-1 ESC. That's a 25 amp burst ESC. F4 flight controller on top with built-in OSD. Then we've got our 40 channel changeable VTX right there with a little UFL connector. I've run my antenna out the top here, but look, I'm sure some people want to run it out the back. That's where I've just got my 2 receiver antennas. It does not come with a receiver. And then the other part, our little FPV camera, this was loose as well, so I had to tighten that up. That's a 2.1mm lens in there, but it does fit in very, very nicely, and I do think you have some pretty good camera protection on here as well. Now the frame itself, it's a unibody frame. I do think it's going to hold up pretty well in crashes, because look, it's pretty small, it's fairly light. We should stick it on the scales actually for you guys. So for a little 3-inch with some 16 size motors, it's only coming in at 140 grams. It does come with an XT30. I might be switching that out for an XT60 probably if I want to put some of my better batteries on here. And then some of the other nice little touches, you do get some, like I got some little sticky pads and some extra zip ties to tie it down. All that sort of stuff, which are kind of little extras I wasn't expecting in such a cheap little kit. Now moving on, let's talk about the design of the thing, and it's not groundbreaking, it's not doing anything terribly innovative, but what I do like, I kind of like the look of it, I like the size of it, and I feel like everything in here, it's compact, you can get to it easily. The only trouble is if you break something, it's going to be a pain to sort of pull it apart, have to repair it, because all these little screws and stuff, that part is a little bit annoying. It's not like some of the bigger craft, you can just undo some of the standoffs, but overall, I feel like they've kind of done a good job when it comes to the actual frame design. The components, well, I'm still on the fence fence about them. It is super cheap, and we really need to go out and fly it around. So the design part and what they've put in here, I think the specs are right, and going through all that, that's been very, very good. But we'll just have to see when we take it out to the field, fly it around, how it actually goes. And that brings us on to the quality of the thing. Now for quality, I'm going to say a 5.5 out of 10. Now that's a pretty low score, but remember, it is only $79. There's some things I don't really like about it. The frame I think is pretty quality, and I like how it's all gone together. I like the aluminium part. It does seem very robust, but the motors themselves, I find them a little bit questionable. The wire is absolutely disgusting and not very nice to solder to. Definitely if you want to cut it. So don't, definitely I'd give a little tip, don't cut the wire, just tin what is already there and then solder that up, because this sort of wire is absolutely horrible. The motors felt very rattly when I just armed it and just doing a little bit of testing while I was binding it up. So the motors feel a little bit rattly. The other part I don't like is, and look, this one really bugs me actually, when you go to connect the camera to the board, it's actually got the wrong plug type on the end. So when you go to plug it in, if you didn't know what you're doing, as a beginner, that could be very, very baffling. It's got a 3-pin connector you've got to put into a 4-pin socket. So I'll show you that on the screen now. So that should flash up. And halfway through the build, it's been about 25 minutes or so, and I'm up to putting the camera in, and there's only one plug for the back of the camera, but there is no other. This one's for the receiver, this little plug here, and we've got a 4-pin connector right here. So what you actually need to do is make sure you get it into the left side of it. So you're just using these 3 pins, it'll kind of just jerry fit in there. That's kind of a little bit confusing, where if you didn't know what you were doing, you could get that around the wrong way or something like that. So the plug that comes on the back of the camera is not the same plug that goes into the board. So I don't know. I'm not a fan of that part. And overall, I feel, and the OSD is not turned on. So there's quite a few little quality issues that you're going to have to sort of take care of now. And I'm also missing these parts at the front. I don't know if they were meant to come, or maybe I just got unlucky. I don't have anything to put in there. So my parts are actually missing in that front part as well. So overall, the quality, well, you do kind of get what you pay for. So even though it's super cheap, there is still quite a few things you will need to fix up. Don't expect to get this thing. It's going to be absolutely perfect and a completely trouble-free experience. Now that brings us on to the pros and the cons. Now I'm going to do all the cons out of the way first. So those quality things. I don't like the rattly motors. I don't like the wires that come on the motors. I really hate how the connection from the plug that's meant to make it super easy from the camera to the flight controller, that doesn't actually go together nicely. You've got to sort of force that in. That doesn't fit a 3-pin to a 4-pin connector. It doesn't have the OSD turned on, which is a bit of a pain, and it didn't come with any instructions either. So when you're going to be bridging something, there's a little pad in there you need to bridge for your receiver, whether you're using S-Bus or not. So that part, if you don't know what you're doing, well, expect to be scratching your head a little bit more. But in terms of the pros, the things I do like, I like the frame, I like the color, I think it looks cool, it actually all fits inside the frame. I think your stuff is well protected, you've got easy access to your USB, all that sort of stuff, the buttons on the outside. But my favorite part, of course, it's got to be, it's got to be the price. And I should also say, I do hate these props. I think these props are garbage. But the price, $79. I mean, you're getting an FPV experience. You can get a lot less for $79. So it's kind of crazy how much you can get for that price. So on the value side of things, this thing is almost unbeatable. What we really need to do, though, is take it out and see how it goes. So that's what we're going to be doing in the part 2. But on the bench, well, it is kind of squaring up. We've definitely got a decent looking quadcopter right here. And for $79, I can't wait to see just what it can do. Rightio, so there it is. There's my part 1 bench breakdown of the Tyro 79, the $79 quadcopter, and overall it's a little bit hit and miss. Now of course the price, you cannot argue with $79. Now the part 2 is going to be coming up. That is going to be a little bit, and you might be seeing that next week or so, because I've been sick, and usually I do the part 1 and the part 2s, release them for you guys on the same day, but because I've been unwell, I haven't had a chance to catch up with the crew. But let me tell you, I'm going to put a sneak peek at the end of this where I have gone out and flown this around. So we're going to do a lot more testing, but on my first impressions, there's some good and there's also some bad. So the designer thing, I like all that sort of stuff and I love the value, but let me tell you something you need to know about this one. The camera is absolute garbage. So if you're trying to watch, I'm going to put some DVR at the end. You cannot see anything out of the front of this, so don't buy this thinking you're going to get something you can take out of the box, put it together, and it's going to fly perfectly and you're going to have the best experience, because you really do get what you pay for. $79 is about as cheap. I don't think you can even make a cheaper 3-inch FPV quadcopter but they had to cut costs from somewhere. So let me tell you straight off the bat, the camera is junk. You're not going to be able to see anything. I don't really like the motors. They don't feel like they have too much power, and the tune out of the box, it definitely needs some work. It's wobbling all over the place, so the flight experience is actually a little bit lackluster. It kind of feels like we're jumping back a year or maybe 2 years ago or something like that. So overall, look, you get what you pay for. Expect a big follow-up in the part 2. We'll get the other crew together, see what they think. But I'm going to say this one, amazing value, but definitely it does have some big cons as well, and especially that camera. I think that might be one of the worst cameras I'd ever seen. Anyway, what do you guys think? Drop your comments down below. What do you think about this thing? What's that DVR at the end? What do you think about the price of this? What does this mean for the future of ours, future of our hobby? Would you prefer to get this? Would you prefer something like the Mobula 7? A whole bunch of discussions. Light it up down below. Other than that, subscribe for more FPV related content, and as always, happy flying. Okie dokie, here we go, on board with the sneak peek DVR, and then we will do much more testing in part 1, but you can see it is bobbling around when it comes to the tune. So when you're pulling out of things, you can see it's bobbling all over the place. It definitely needs a lot of work in the PIDs, and also those disgusting watermelon props, they're not going to be helping that whatsoever, so definitely think about upgrading those. The big one for me, and it had pretty lackluster power, but the big one for me, definitely, if you're going to get this, please think about upgrading your camera. So I found, you can see those trees in the distance, they're very, very hard to distinguish, and we're not talking about the breakup, I mean like the contrast. It's very, very hard to see where you're going, trying to pick your lines, because everything just sort of blends in together. The lights and the darks and the dynamic range, it is very, very low quality on this camera. So for me, flying this thing around, I found it extremely difficult, and look, any pilot with a few skills can make a quad look okay in the air, but for me, I'm just letting you know the camera in this thing was garbage. So please swap it out for a Foxeer, a Runcam, even some of the Cadex is going to make a huge difference. And then we can work on the bad tune and we can upgrade those little props. But we'll talk about that a lot more in the part 2.